Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to el podcast del Salón de Idiomas. I'm Lon, and with me here is Sally Bolton. Sally, nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too, Lon. It's a pleasure to be here in the podcast of Salón de Idiomas. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's such a privilege to have you here, and I'm really glad that you came here today to tell us all about the common questions, and perhaps not really common questions that some of our listeners may have regarding the ISE Digital. So, Sally is the academic lead of Trinity College for London and Spain, and also Europe, East and West. Is that accurate?
Yeah, my job is to help all the centres in all of these different countries prepare their students and their candidates for Trinity's exams. And part of that now is doing the ISE Digital exam, which is our new addition to our offer.
Yeah, and we couldn't be more excited about that. Well, you are basically just expressing that. Of course, it goes without saying that Trinity has this new test has the same old and the same good reputation that Trinity has on its own, right? Nevertheless, of course, we're gonna dig into that a bit later. However, I would like to just start with a couple of things. Like, for instance, we know there is one of the most interesting features about this test is that it's actually adaptive, right? And in simple terms.
Yes.
So how does that make an exam fairer than a traditional fixed paper?
Right. Well, what an adaptive exam does is in this case, it does a small level test at the beginning to see more or less what the candidate's level is. And then it provides tasks which are at the right level for that candidate. And then it will change. And if the candidate does well on a task, then they'll get something slightly more difficult. And if they find it a bit difficult, then perhaps they'll get a task. The next task will be slightly easier. And what it is it means that you can do a test in a much shorter time. Because a lot of digital exams, they're called these progressive exams, which start at the easiest questions, and then you keep on going till you get to a really the difficult questions. And those take a lot of time. And what happens is candidates get fatigued. So the idea of an adaptive test is it gives you the questions that are at your level. And slightly higher maybe, and if they're slightly lower, then you move up, and so it can really focus in on what your level is, and it means you can do it much faster, and so you don't have this fatigue, and the test experience is a lot better for the candidates, because if you're getting something which is way too easy, then you feel like you're wasting your time a bit, and if you're getting something or there's something wrong with the exam, it's too easy, or if you're getting something that's too difficult, then you feel frustrated that you can't do it. And so you're getting tasks that are focused on the level that you have, and then the tasks change to really refine what level you can show.
So what I really love about this is that, as a matter of fact, it takes away one of the key concepts that later on you have to teach as well, which is the stamina. In many cases, you have to tell them okay, we are doing these exercises perfectly fine. However, now let's try to practice this nonstop for an hour and a half, and it feels like, did I go to a gym, or did I go to my English lesson? What is going on?
Exactly. If you're reading and writing and listening and for this long period of time, then you get tired. You get your concentration drops. Well, the whole point of an adaptive test like this is that you can do it. The whole exam takes up to 105 minutes, which is nothing really when you compare it to a traditional pen and paper exam. It's a lot faster. You get all 4 skills done in that time, and so it's really. I think, you asked me, how is it fairer? I think it's fairer in that sense that, it's fairer to the candidate that they're not getting fatigued and they're getting questions which are directed at their own level.
Yeah, and I mean, also it's wonderful for those who have a tight schedule, right? So
of course, absolutely.
Instead of saying, well, I need to sacrifice my entire morning to take my English test, it's only gonna be 1 or 2 hours, and that's pretty much it, right?
And as you know, with many exams, you're doing the speaking and listening on one day and the reading and writing on another day, and so you can do it all in one go, in one morning or one afternoon, in less than 2 hours. You go in, you set yourself up, and 2 hours later you're out and you've finished the exam.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So now that we were mentioning about the students and future
Mm-hmm.
candidates, I mean, I suppose that you have seen a lot of candidate performances. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, which task tends to surprise even confident students, and why do you think that happens?
I think one of the more tricky tasks, which perhaps takes some practice before you do the exam, is on the speaking
Uh-huh.
module. You have task 4, which is that it's summarizing a talk or conversation. And
Yeah.
so you have to listen to a talk or conversation, and you only hear it once. You have to take notes, or if you want to, and then retell that information to a different person. It's like a mediation task. It's what we're doing all the time in real life, right? Oh, I heard something on the radio and I know you're interested in it, and so I want to tell you about what I heard. And it's a lot to do in one, there's a lot going on there.
Mm-hmm.
You have to listen, you have to organize the information, you have to put your ideas in order, you have to think about the person that you're speaking to as well, and how you're going to address them. Are they someone that you know well? Are they a friend? In which case you address them in one way. Are you giving it, is it information that you have to tell to your teacher in class? In which case you're going to present it in a different way. There's a lot going on there. But then I think that's a good thing, because this is what we're doing all the time in real life, in communication. We're hearing things and then retelling them to other people, and we are adapting our tone and our and adapting how we organize the ideas, and we're making choices about what information to include. It's a really good real life task, but it's tricky, and
Yeah.
I think it does take a bit of practice, especially because you're only hearing the information once, which again reflects real life performance. So it's good, but it can be, it might need to practice it a couple of times first before the exam.
Yeah, so Sally, if you allow me, I would tell you that I believe
Mm-hmm.
that what we're doing here is not necessarily it's necessarily gonna be super challenging in the long term. I believe
Mm-hmm.
that it's just something that is really unexpected, since this is the case even in school when we are like taught English in schools, especially in Spain. This is not a skill that is necessarily like fostered, right?
Mm-hmm.
So of
Yeah.
course it seems like a little bit odd that you have to do that in an English test. Nevertheless, just like as you mentioned, this is something that we normally do in the regular basis, which is something that I really like about this
Yeah.
test, that it takes what really is necessary in the real world when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
being able to speak in another language, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so in the end, I believe that it feels like we're inventing the wheel here, but we're actually not. We're just actually being aware that there's something actually pivotal for people to be successful at, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Lon. What it is in the development of this exam, the developers, the experts, the academics, they studied what do young people, well, not just young people, but what do people do in an academic context now? What do people do in a work context? And, this is what it's directed at. What are actually people doing on a daily basis? And the tasks are designed to reflect those tasks that people are doing on a daily basis. So, for example, in the speaking, we have this task that we just talked about, but there's
Mm-hmm.
also, you have to go in prepared to give a 2-minute presentation about something. Well, of course, that's what we're doing all the time
Yeah.
in the school, in the workplace. You have time to prepare, and you go in and then you have to answer a question about it. That's what we're doing all the time. And this, like in the writing part, there's about writing on a forum or writing on a group chat. This the online written communication task, which is about what people are doing. People are listening and taking notes in lectures or in presentations. They're reading different types of text, and so all of these different tasks which are on the exam have been designed to reflect this more modern world that we live in today.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, then since we're addressing the speaking, I would like
Mm-hmm.
to go for that. So this is something that it sounds a bit odd for plenty of people, so let's try to clarify this. So the
Mm-hmm.
speaking is recorded and assessed externally, right?
Yes.
Why do we separate delivery from assessment, and what does that do for reliability?
Right. Okay. So there's the 4 modules. We're talking about the speaking, but the
Mm-hmm.
listening and the reading are like objectively right or wrong. It's is it this option, or this option?
Okay.
And so those can be easily assessed
Okay.
by the computer at that moment. And that's what we talked when we talked about the adaptability, that it's, you can, in real time, you can say, okay, this is what the candidate has got right and what got wrong on this task. Let's give them another task which is either at the same level, slightly higher, slightly lower. That can be done in real time. Now, the computer, the algorithm, the system, it's not going to assess speaking or writing in that same rigorous way. So this is recorded and then it's sent to human assessors, and human assessors have a rating scale and they assess this separately. Okay, so what it gives is it gives the candidate the freedom to talk. They're being recorded, but they've got this freedom to talk without anxiety. They're talking to an avatar, and it's a very real avatar. It does look very real, but they're talking to this avatar, and they don't have the anxiety of whether or not the avatar is understanding them or not. That comes later. And then a human assessor listens to the recordings and rigorously gives a score according to what they can hear. And this is always going to be done by a human assessor, because the computer, it can do a lot of things, but can it assess the success of an interaction, in terms of tone of voice and in terms of, pace and the specific language that a student is using? I think, this is needed. A human assessor is needed to do that. And so we have expert assessors who then provide a score for the speaking and for the writing.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that we know that there is not like a checklist that you have to fit in when you're answering the questions, like, oh, you used this word wrongly, so that's like you're not answering the question because you didn't use this word in this question. So in the end, it's actually taking into account the holistic approach of like how
exactly
your answer is being delivered, if it's coherent and if it's cohesive.
Exactly.
And so
yes.
on, right? Fantastic. And of course,
exactly, which I think it's subjective, that needs a human to listen to it, but it's also, like I said, very rigorous. There is a rating scale, and and these are checked and rechecked with different people, but it does need a human. That's still that human interaction, even though it is later. That comes later. It's it's recorded, and then there is the interaction later when the human assessor is listening and assessing how well that task has been fulfilled, really.
Yeah, so don't worry. For those who are listening, of course, if you're taking your test is going to be evaluated in the most rigorous way that we know Trinity is famous for. So don't worry about it. It's going to be perfectly fine. And for those who feel a little bit nervous, you don't have to be worrying about being in front of a person, like perhaps like, I don't know, stumbling on words or something along those lines. And I have to admit that in many cases, that is also useful for those who who are very attentive of like nonverbal feedback. For instance, sometimes the examiner, even though that they're trying to be like as neutral as possible, perhaps there is a little gesture that might be interpreted as you did a terrible job, or I didn't understand you, you're gonna fail the test. So we're avoiding that part, right?
Yeah. They just you have to look at it as if you're recording a voice note on your phone, and you just keep going and press send. That's what it is. You're recording a voice note, and the answer and off it goes for someone else to listen to at a later moment.
Perfect. Okay, now one of the things that I really like about this test also is that it's not really about, for instance, the preparation. It's not really about whether you are studying for the test. No, it's more like if you are studying English. So
yes,
if you had to describe the real world purpose of each speaking task in just one line, maybe, what would you say they're actually training?
Okay, so all the tasks, or one line for each task?
One line for each task.
Okay, so task one, they are assessing your ability to do small talk and general conversation with people. Task two is assessing your ability to give a presentation, a prepared presentation, and answer questions on it. Task three is assessing your ability to interact with others in various situations and to respond to changes of situation. And task four is assessing your ability to listen and retell that information to another person.
See, normal
Yeah, does that make
activities.
sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that you definitely hit the nail on that one. And of course, I
Mhm.
would like to say that, for instance, one of my favorite ones is part two, since they
Mhm.
get to talk about whatever they want. And
Yeah,
my
yeah.
recommendation is that you have to be as excited as you can with your topic.
Absolutely. Like this is the whole, like for those of you who have, taught Trinity before and prepared for Trinity exams, this is the whole philosophy. This is a big part of Trinity's philosophy, that the exam should be personalized, that you should be able to bring something of your life into an exam and share that with another person. And, we see the topic in the GCSE exams, we see the topic in the ISE exams. If you're interested in the drama suite of exams, it's the same thing. You have free choice about what you want to bring into the assessments. And it's this, that it shouldn't be that an exam is just putting everything on you. The candidate should have some autonomy in that as well. And
Correct.
so this is what it is. Talk about something you're genuinely interested in. That's what I always say to my students. Pick something you're actually passionate about, because if you're going to prepare something, then you may as well prepare it about something that you like, whatever that is. And try, obviously, if you're going for a higher grade, then you need to include language that is at that grade. If you're going for a C1 exam, you can't just talk in the present simple. You have to have some more complex structures and language in there. But choose a topic that you like, that you're genuinely interested in. And like you said, be passionate, be enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, that's something that it also resembles a little bit the traditional test, which it also has a part where you have to develop a topic on your own. And I also consider that this is also a fairer approach of the test, since if we are trying to be as real as we can, well, of course, in real life, we are expected to be able to communicate regarding several topics. Nevertheless, it is also true that we want to talk about the things that we like, right?
Yeah, and why not? That's that they can, and also for at least that task, that candidates can go in feeling confident that they're prepared, they've done it, they've done everything they can before the exam, they know what they're going to be talking about, and so they can feel super confident and motivated for that task as well, which I think is important.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So now let's move on to the listening, shall we?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
here, time doesn't stop in this module, and the
Mhm.
answers are given while the audio plays. Actually,
Mhm.
what authentic communication skill is measured there?
Well, that's, when we're listening and evaluating. That's the whole point of the listening skill, where we're listening to information and we're incorporating that new information with what we've already heard. We're predicting what we might think is going to come next. That's what we do in the skill of listening. And so the idea is that as you're listening, you have a few seconds to read the questions beforehand, maybe not time to read all the options, but at least to read the questions that are coming up. And so the idea is you read these questions, and then as you're listening, you can click on the answers as you go. And they're not your final answer. You can, when you're listening the second time, you can always make changes. You don't have to, but you click as you go, and then, take a minute to quickly look at it and assess, and then move on to the next listening task. We don't listen and then sit and think for 5 minutes about what we heard. Where it's a constant, it's a skill which we need to do in real time, and
Yeah.
so that's what the questions are there for.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound, I have to admit that at first glance, it does sound a little daunting. However, the moment that you actually start working on it, you would see that, again, it's actually quite intuitive. And on the
Yeah.
other hand, it actually feels natural. So in
Mhm.
the end, I believe that even though that it can be a little bit, again, scary to do this at first,
Mhm.
I'm sure that after a little practice, this part
Yeah.
is going to go as smoothly as the other ones, right?
To be honest, I don't think it's that different from traditional listening activities that we're doing in class all the time, that people have the questions there and they're listening and doing the questions as, just a traditional listening activity that are in course books that people use in class. I don't feel it's that different really from anything that candidates are already used to. I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
truly believe that is 100% true. Now,
Mhm.
I do have to address another concern that candidates might have regarding this test,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
it's a timer overall for the entire test rather than
Mhm.
separate timers for each skill. So
Yes.
even though that, of course, I believe that it makes total sense since we have to make sure that we manage our time properly.
Yeah.
What advice would you give candidates that they want to manage their time effectively across these different tasks?
Okay, so basically the speaking you don't have to worry about, because the speaking just moves automatically from one task to the next. And so, like you're not going to lose time there. It just goes, it is as long as it takes, and it goes from one to the other. And the listening is quite similar as well. The candidates, like we just talked about, that, you do the listening, you answer the questions, maybe one for a few seconds, just put your eyes on the different questions, but then move on to the next one, because, if you don't have another opportunity, once you've heard it twice or once, as if in one particular task, then you can't hear it again. So just whatever you think the answer is, and then move on to the next. The problem then comes more, I think, in the reading, because well, you're going to get a maximum of 30 questions in the reading. That's, might be 4 tasks, something about approximately 4 tasks. You should really spend only about 20 minutes on this part. And what advice I would give to candidates here, if you are finding it super difficult, if you're finding it really hard, well, then the next task perhaps is going to be easier if the system is going to recognize if you do the answers and you don't do particularly well, then the next task is going to be more at your level. So just put what you think and move on, because you're not going to gain anything by spending a lot of time on that particular task. Yeah, because then submit the answers, and then the next task that you get is going to be more at your level, I think. And if it's easy, well, then do it quickly and move on to the next one, because you're going to get a more difficult one the next time. And it's going to be able to assess your level anyway. So there's no point spending a lot of time on it, because you're only taking away time then from your writing task. So, just read. And I think for teachers in class as well, it's a case of doing reading quite quickly. So, and training candidates to do it reasonably quickly, keeping an eye on the time, and trying to save about 40 minutes for your writing. Obviously, this depends on different candidates as well. Some candidates can write quite quickly, but need more time for reading. Well, if you know that yourself, then you can control your own time. Yeah. It's the same as in paper exams as well. They have, in the ISE paper edition, we have 2 reading tasks and 2 writing tasks, and 2 hours in total, and they have to control that time themselves. Correct. And sometimes you can see students and they're thinking, oh, you're spending too much time on the reading, you need to get onto the writing, but there's nothing you can do. It's up to them to control their time. And so it's a case of keeping an eye on the timer, but don't spend too much time on the reading, because you're not going to gain anything by spending extra time.
Yeah, and I mean, you definitely have a really good point, that we also have to not be too concerned about perhaps like making just a single mistake. We have to be a little bit just more concerned about our time management. As you said, I mean, if we are struggling way too much with one question, okay, well, we're going to get it wrong. That's sad. Move on, and you'll get one at your level next, and you'll be able to do a lot better. I mean, we still have plenty of opportunities to do it right, and of course, it's going to be useful. And now another thing that I'm taking from this is that actually the time management, even though that it sounds perhaps like a little bit worrisome at first, like you have one single timer for all skills, like, oh my god, how am I gonna actually manage all this? Well, in reality, it's only really for the reading and the writing. It's for the reading and the writing, because the speaking is going to go at it takes as long as it takes. It's around about 15 minutes, and it will be that, because you can't pause it just keeps going. You can't actually pause it and stop it. With the listening as well, the listening tests, the audios take as long as they take, and if you just keep moving on, then it takes as long as it takes. The only thing is that candidates, I think, can spend too much time on the reading just because they want to get it perfect, like you said, and that's not the point of the exam, to get every question right. The point of the exam is to determine your level, and obviously we all want to get all the questions right, but that's not necessary. It's not going to happen, because you're going to get something to see if you can get higher. They're going to give you something which is slightly higher than your level. Yeah. But just to see if you can, like if you're a B1 level student and you're getting a B2 or a high B1 or a low B2 level text, then it makes sense that you're not going to get it right. Yeah. I have to say Doesn't it feel a little ironic that this test is so human approach whilst
Yeah.
being done on a computer?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it just reflects, I think, the world that we live in today. Look at us here talking. We're
Yeah.
talking, but we're talking digitally. And that's what the world is today. It's I think human life is intertwined now with digital life. That's what it is.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, to wrap up the part where we are addressing all these common students' concerns, if you
Mm-hmm.
could erase one persistent classroom myth about digital exams forever,
Mm-hmm.
which one
Yeah.
would go straight into the bin?
Okay. Well, I think that some people believe that if it's a digital exam, it's not as rigorous, it's not as
Okay.
valid as a paper exam. That they think, the traditional exam, doing it in a paper, in a room, in these controlled conditions, that's the only way to do an exam. And I think some people think, oh, well, if you're doing it online, then, you can cheat, or you can, get help, and of course, it's not like that at all. It is still a rigorous exam. It is done in controlled conditions in a center, that you use a secure browser that means that it blocks you being able to use anything else on the computer. I think some people think, oh, well, if you're doing it on the computer, you're just doing it with ChatGPT or something. And of course, it's nothing
Yeah.
like that. It is a really vigorous rigorous exam. It's been developed over 5 years. It took to develop this exam. It's been validated. It's been tested. It's been it's been studied and compared with more traditional exams, and it is a really rigorous exam. And so people shouldn't fear that just
Yeah.
because it's done on a computer, it's not as good as this. We're used to sitting in an exam room and doing it with a pen and paper. That's what we're all used to doing. That's what exams look like.
Yeah.
Well, these days exams don't have to look like that anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not only for you, but also you have to consider that the test is done in a test center. So, of course,
Yeah.
they're going to make sure that you're not going to be cheating.
Exactly. It's not that you're just sitting at home and, typing away on the computer with your phone in the other hand. That's not how this works. It's done in rigorous, controlled conditions in a centre, exactly with the paper edition, that you have the centre controlling and making sure that you're not going to be doing any, you're not going to be cheating. You're not going to be using any other means to pass the exam.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Now, so another thing that is really interesting is the feedback profile that you are
Uh-huh.
given once you are receiving your results, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
it is detailed and sometimes actually intimidating. What is
Yeah.
the smartest way for candidates and teachers to use it
Uh-huh.
more productively?
Right. Okay. Well, I think, we've got two strands here. How can the teacher use it at the center, and how can the candidate use it on an individual basis? The
Mhm.
candidate will get they'll say on the diagnostic report, it says, okay, for reading, for example, you were at a B2 level, and this is what a a B2 language learner can do. And then you get these bars on the other side which tell you, I think it's out of 6, and it tells you these different sub skills, where you are on this bar from 1 to 6. Okay, within this B2 profile or
Okay.
B1 profile. Okay, so I think actually it's really good because it's showing you, okay, this is what a typical B2 level language learner can do, and this is where you are. And these bars you can see really simply, okay, well, I'm really good at, for example, at reading, at getting the global picture of the text, and I'm really good at finding details, but perhaps I'm not so good at inference. That's and that might be, that's a more of a higher order skill, and that might be where some candidates have difficulties. And so, okay, well, I'm going to ask my teacher, what is inference? And I'm going to find out how I can practice this a little bit more. And then maybe I can move that bar further up, and then I can move into the C1 profile, next year when I do the exam. And I think on a personal level, that's what candidates need to do. They need to look at these different sub skills and see where, they're progressing and getting towards the top end of that band, whether that's A2, B1, B2, and where they're at the lower end of that that profile.
Mm-hmm.
And those are perhaps the skills they need to focus on. And from a teacher's point of view, well, you've got a class, you've got maybe 8 of these diagnostic diagnostic reports that you can look at, and you can say, okay, we're doing all right with this, but there's a pattern here, and maybe on the writing, for example, the organization of ideas is not particularly good. Well, for my next, when we continue with the same class, or the next time I'm teaching this level, this is what I need to focus on to make sure that my candidates can improve this particular sub-skill.
Something that I really am a big fan of this
Mm-hmm.
is that it kind of like takes away this somewhat mentality that many students have, and sometimes teachers as well, that
Mm-hmm.
it is the student and teacher against the exam, whereas
Right.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not really like that. It's actually you are all together working in order for you to actually fulfill your full potential, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's, like, again, this is part of Trinity's, and it's always been part of Trinity's philosophy, that you get feedback after the exam in one form or another, whether that's if you're doing a face-to-face exam, with a teacher visiting the centre, they give you this feedback about how well as the centre has done as a whole. Well, now we've moved on to this digital format, and so a candidate is getting individualized feedback on their performance, that the system can recognize where they've done well, looking at the scores. Like I said, we have these objectively marked reading and listening questions. Well, each question is focused on a particular sub-skill, and you can say, well, you're getting these right, but you're struggling, you're getting less of these particular ones right. And so that's something to work on for you as a language learner, and which is for the good of everybody. It's for the good of the teachers, it's for the good of the individual candidates and the centres, so that you've got information. I think it's really important to have this information and use information to improve,
Yeah, I mean, it's not anymore like, haha, you couldn't beat the test. It's more like, okay, well, you did really well on this, and your level is around this place. However, you still need to improve on this if you are looking for the B2 or the C1. So just improve on that, and you're going to be good to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, another thing that, of course, we were mentioning a little bit about this rigorous approach and making sure that people are not cheating. So when it comes to security and standardization, of course, these are crucial online, right? So what quality control measures keep the playing field level across different test centers and equipment?
Well, there are standard requirements that the computer needs to meet, and they're not very advanced requirements at all, but like you need to have a version of Windows, a certain resolution on the screen. You need to use headphones like we are both wearing, which are plugged into the computer to avoid interference. That they're actually, yes, exactly, plugged in, not Bluetooth. They have to be plugged in to avoid interference with and so there's certain equipment requirements that everyone needs to meet in order to be able to do the exam. And then once you have this equipment, you have to download, I think I mentioned it before, this is secure browser, and you do the exam on the secure browser, which blocks everything else on the computer. You can't then go on to Google or ChatGPT and ask it for the answer. It's everything is blocked, so you can only see the exam. And so in terms of in the center, and then it's obviously the center's requirement, just as it is with traditional paper and pen exams, it's the center's job. This is why we're doing it. You can't do the exams at home. You have to do them in the center, because the center is going to check that you are sitting at the correct distance away from another. Although in terms of cheating, actually, because it's an adaptive test, every candidate is going on their own test journey. And so you can't just like kind of lean back and look like that anyway, because they're doing it. They've got a different item. They've got a different question. Everyone's on their own journey, and two people sitting next to each other are unlikely to have the same exam questions. And so in terms of cheating, it gets rid of that completely, because absolutely, everyone's doing their own exam. And then, of course, there are procedures in place for inspections to take place as well, for someone to come and visit the centre while the exam is taking place. So to check that everything is being done fairly and securely. Later on, it's not available at the moment, but later on there will be online proctoring as well. That there's you have your camera on and it's checking. There's an online proctor checking what you're doing while you're doing the exam. So I mean, just because it's digital doesn't mean it's less secure. In fact, it probably means it's more secure than because we've got all this new technology that we can use to make sure that nothing untoward is happening while someone is doing an exam. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, because there's this huge bank of items as well, of test items, there's so many different reading texts and writing prompts and speaking questions. There's this big bank of items. And so because it's all digital now as well, there are systems in place which can validate all of these questions and check that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing as well. Because as candidates are answering them, they're being evaluated. The candidates are being evaluated, but also the questions and the items are being evaluated to make sure that they are at the right level and they are assessing what they're supposed to assess, which is obviously so much easier to do when it's digital than when it's paper based.
Okay, absolutely. So we know that for those who are perhaps a little concerned about this certification, that it was as genuine as it can humanly be, with the help of all these digital tools that we have. And
yes.
It's also a great moment to mention that, of course, you can always take your ISE digital test in Salón de Idiomas as well. So it's a perfect place that we're following all the standards that Trinity has requested.
Yes.
So now this is actually taking me, now that you have clarified all this is taking me to one, perhaps this is the most important question that candidates are looking for. So when it comes in terms of recognition, how does ISE Digital compare to the traditional ISE, both nationally and internationally?
Basically, the simple answer is they are exactly the same. The certificate that you receive as a candidate, you can't tell whether it's ISE Digital or it's ISE Paper Edition. The skills which are being assessed are exactly the same. The underlying skills which are being assessed on ISE Paper are exactly the same as the underlying skills that are being assessed on the ISE Digital Edition. They are two editions of the same underlying concept. The tasks are different, but they are in all intents and purposes, in terms of the specifications of what you need to do to be a B1 level candidate, what you need to do to be a B2 level, to receive a certificate for a B2 level candidate, that's the same. So the certificate that you receive is exactly the same. You get a score, an overall score, whether that's A2, B1, B2, C1, and then you'll get a numerical score for each of the 4 different skills. And it says on the certificate, taken at a registered exam centre, so that whoever's looking at it on the digital certificate, whoever's looking at it can say, okay, this was taken in a centre with all the security that goes with that. But it's the same certificate. And so, if you want to go to university, it's accepted by ACLES, it's accepted by CRUE. If you're looking for opposiciones, you just look on the BOE for whatever that opposiciones is. And if it says ISE on there, well, and you need this level for this many points, well, it's the same.
That's exactly what it is. Exactly. So you don't have to have any threats concerning if you're wasting your time taking this test, because it's not like that. It's
the same certificate, so someone might ask you, oh, did you take this, the digital or the paper? But from the certificate, you don't know one way or another.
Well, thank you so much, Sally. It has been such a great interview, and thank you so much for all that you have shared. Now, I do have just one more question. So for someone who is taking the ISE Digital tomorrow, what single sentence of advice or encouragement would you give them?
Oh, that's a difficult one. But I think I would say, remember to show what you know. Okay? Just show the computer, the avatar, the assessor who is listening or reading your writing later, show them what you know. Because when we're in, this is what I always say to my students, when you're in an exam situation, You always kind of revert to with the nerves, the adrenaline, you might revert to what you're comfortable with. So perhaps you do have a B1 level of English, or a B2 level of English. But then when you're in the stress of the exam, you hear a question and you respond to that question, and you respond with what you're comfortable with. And maybe that's a slightly lower level than what you're actually capable of. I don't know, Alon, whether you find the same with your students, but yeah. I think people go with what they're comfortable with. You've got to take risks. You've got to go for it. Show the assessor, show the computer what it is that you know. So go for it and use those more complex structures. Use that more, the less common vocabulary. Show them what you are really capable of, because the assessor can only assess you on what they hear or what they read. So you've got to go for it.
Wow. Thank you so much for this opportunity to have you here, Sally. It has been such an enlightening experience. Thank you so much. I believe that our listeners are going to learn so much from what you have shared. So yeah, is there anything else that you would like to tell us?
No, I think it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I really, really hope that the candidates in Salón de Idiomas do well on the exam, that they enjoy it, that they have a positive exam experience. I think they will. I think I did a pilot for over a year ago now, when ISE Digital was first starting out. I did a pilot with my candidates, and they were really, really positive about it. So I really hope that it's the same for all of your students there, and they enjoy it and they get that certificate, which demonstrates what they can do in English. Oh, and also just do remember as well that you can always retake one module within 90 days. So if you're just slightly off the level that you need, well, retake one of the modules, practice a little bit look at your diagnostic reports, practice what you're missing, and within 90 days take it again and get your level up.
Yeah, there you are. You don't have to repeat the whole thing, just what you missed.
No.
There you are.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Sally. I look forward to seeing you in the future, and I hope that you're having a great day.
Okay, the same to you, Lon. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye, Sally. Take care.
Bye.